Hey guys, it is January 22nd, 2026 here with your after hours recap. Just a quick one. We had the metals continue higher, and that was led by a bit of silver. That was led by some gold. And, with gold, I have started to once again reduce a little bit of my NEM position into this extension away from the 50 simple moving average. If we just decided that we wanted to consolidate some, allow the 50 to catch up, on my NEM, then I'd be happy to just let it continue to work above the ascending 20. We did have the big movers today. Again, in the silver space, if you looked at Hecla, really big move. And if you kind of looked around the board yesterday with the gold miners, you had GFI with the bearish engulfing, nice little bounce today. You had Wheaton Precious Metal with the bearish engulfing, really nice comeback today. You had AEM with the bearish engulfing and a new closing high today. So that's just kind of the environment that we're in. You think things are going to slow up, but that does not end up being the case. You just are continuing higher. Really nice to see, and ultimately, kind of difficult if you're trying to play any of the backside. Once again, the memory stocks were pretty dang fantastic. SNDK continuing a bit higher after a little bit of a morning dip. Micron trying to push a little bit higher. It'll be interesting to see how things hold up with Intel down a little bit on earnings. If we kind of take this down to a smaller time frame, you could see that Intel is down to 48 bucks on earnings. Not the end of the world. Obviously, we're at 54. You're down to 48. How does that affect some of these other semiconductors? Obviously, an AVGO already looks a little bit rough here. Probably a visit into the 200 simple moving average would be my guess. But on the flip side of an AVGO looking pretty poor, AMD does look pretty dang good on the flip side of that, but also slight little gap down here on the back of Intel. Genomic stocks I thought were fantastic. In fact, they weren't just fantastic, they were the second best group out there. CRISPR, absolutely massive kind of a day. 10x Genomics TXG yesterday, it was one that caught my attention, 2 days ago. Really nice job. Nice continuation today. Not really buyable up here, but nice to see the strength going into those places. And, for every rocket stock we have out there, we've got some names that are kind of fading off, especially older leaders, right? And AppLovin looks to be visiting the 200 simple moving average here pretty soon. Palantir, which used to be, everybody's favorite, potentially a stage 3 top, at the very least coming into the 200 simple moving average. CLS also potentially looking like a late stage base. Who knows how this one plays out, but maybe it just needs a little bit more digestion, more time. NVIDIA is one that I am short and just closed off on the lows today. We will see what happens into tomorrow if we re-break the 50 simple moving average. But ultimately, it's kind of a mixed bag. I'm having troubles getting situated in stuff, right? Like, I've been kind of preaching buy pullbacks into ascending moving averages. And here you go. You get Rocket Lab pulling right into the 20. And of course, I don't buy this one on the 620 setup at about 84 bucks. I decide to buy an APLD. And I buy APLD on this little bit of a pullback, and I'm sitting here thinking to myself, okay, let's see if we can start to straighten out and then work our way higher. And not to say that an APLD looks poor, but an iron instead just working its way lower all day long, a Cypher working its way lower, kind of all day long. So a little bit on the annoying side, just even getting positioned in some of this stuff. BABA, fortunately, I added some yesterday right in here as we were reclaiming VWAP, and that was a good thing, 167. Fortunately, it did not go make new lows on the day, and then as the market started to turn back up into the afternoon, BABA closed well, and then you get the overnight gap up. I thought the news was fantastic, and then today, just as you were kind of taking out VWAP, I said, you know what? The last thing I want is to, be holding really nice ads from yesterday and then not paying myself anything. So I paid myself a little bit. In an ideal world, Alibaba continues to just go higher out of this falling wedge. But at the same time, I have to pay myself a little bit. It has been a choppy environment for me. A-Lab, just one that continues to chop around here. I do continue to think that over 185, this thing is going to be good. But It just continues to be a super choppy, sloppy mess. Over 185. Hopefully, this thing will get going. Again, this being a semiconductor, I don't know what it'll do tomorrow if an AVGO continues to pull, CRDO, ASML, KLAC. Like I was just looking around the board for the semiconductors, and you are gapping down overnight after basically an all little day sell off on this KLAC. Not like it's a big deal. You're still well above the rising 50. LRCX, same story, just an all-day fade, gapping down just a little bit. ASML, again, similar story, hanging in there pretty well, but once again, gapping down in the overnight session. TSM over the last few days, just kind of weak, and then hanging out near lows. So, and of course, you're going to be gapping down a little bit probably tomorrow as well. So it'll be interesting to see how the semiconductors play out. We already know how banks are kind of holding up, and that is fairly weak over the last few months, really. And JP Morgan living underneath the 50 simple moving average definitely does not help. Wells Fargo, trying to bounce back, but still hanging out and digesting underneath the 50 simple moving average. I'm gonna give some credit to a Tesla getting back above the 50. Really, really nice action. I'm going to give credit to an AMD getting nicely back above the 50. This is a name that I do want to find myself back in and eventually own for this giant cup and handle breakout. I think it's acting, just fine over the last couple days, but I own this thing on the 8th, I added on the 9th, I added on the 13th, and then I got shaken out on the 14th, unfortunately. Just kind of putting on too much size too quickly. Lesson learned, and then obviously you get a washout on the 20th, and then just powerful move from a Tesla on some of the news from a Lemonade. So I think part of my issue at the moment is just stock selection. Yes, I want to buy the Rocket Lab, but and you're not extended from the 50, which is a good thing. And I want to buy the Rocket Lab, but I don't, because part of me is thinking, an ASTS yesterday with the digestion it took, I thought, maybe this thing would, have a little bit of a not as powerful update right back. But of course, it did. I'm seeing some of the weakness in a KTOS over the last couple days, which just could use some good consolidation. KRMN yesterday was showing some weakness, only to gap up and make a new high today. So it's just a bit of a choppy environment. Not only did I try that one, I also tried AAOI today, pulling back into the 5-day, started to turn back up, and then all of a sudden I get long, and the thing just then rolls over and absolutely finds no bid all day. So I had to get out of AAOI, I had to get out of an APLD, just not enough strength to be able to hold them overnight. I'm definitely not holding flat into the overnight session and just kind of praying for a big move the next day. That is not what I want to do. I'd rather go into the next trading day with a clear head, make sure that I've got some traction. If I'm going to add to something like an Alibaba, I want to know that by day's end, if I'm buying this 167, right, we're getting a nice little cushion where I'm up at least a few points, right, on my buy, that I can comfortably hold it overnight, and then I get lucky for holding it overnight, right? Not buy an APLD and then all of a sudden, you think it's going to start to turn up, and then it doesn't turn up and it just goes sideways all day, and just not enough power there. But instead, if you buy the right name, and that's what makes this environment kind of interesting, it's a true stock picker's market. If you buy the right name as it's turning back up $84, absolutely fantastic throughout the rest of the session. So there's a difference there, and I guess knowing that the rocket stocks have been stronger, right? That was something that I probably should is just keyed in on right away, and instead, I even made mention of it, right? Buying an APLD while an iron's not doing too much, that's not going to help, right? While a Cypher's not doing too much, that's not going to help. While a Galaxy or a CoreWeave were coming down, right? Of course, that's not going to help. These are all quote-unquote younger data center stocks, and it's a little bit of a pain in the ass. So home builders today, they had a little bit of a digestion. I don't think anything too much of it. The XBI, fantastic. And, we had a few of these beautiful breakout for the XBI over the last few days. And, we've had a few of these names on watch over the last couple of sessions. AXSM, and then going into today, GRAL was one of them. For anybody who bought it 104 and then 106.5, congratulations. Really, really nice push for a GRAL today. And again, that's what makes it such an interesting environment. I could put out a really nice watch list, and you can execute. If you execute on half of them, right, that could be the half that don't perform well, and then the other half are off to the races, or vice versa in this environment. So it's tricky to say the least, but it is still, the job, and you can't really get too down when things aren't necessarily going your way. Like I said, you're going to get lucky on some Alibabas. You're going to not get so lucky not buying the Rocket Lab today and instead going with an APLD. So that's just part of nature of the beast. No crying at the casino, no big deal. That, again, is just part of the job. And, I'm always looking forward to the challenge, even when I'm not trading my absolute best. I guess the job is, over the last 6-8 weeks, is just manage your losses, right? Don't let things get too out of hand, and then let your winners work. And then speaking of letting winners work, Netflix today down about 2.5% even after earnings. This is effectively a new closing low in this entire formation. That is very, very good for my short position, and I will just continue to trail this one so long as it continues to work. We already talked about my Alibaba. We're going to just continue to let this one work. I initially bought it 159, so we are hanging in there pretty well, but it was good to just take a little third of my position off the table, make sure I'm getting paid. NVIDIA, I do have a little bit of a short on, and I would be happy to kind of add some more. I added today as a 5-minute opening range break on the low, and then you went to go revisit those highs, but then you just failed right at those highs, and it was just chop city all day until Intel earnings. I also have my XOM long, and we will continue to let it work. I did take some off yesterday into the push. Today, this thing continues higher. It is definitely a nat gas beneficiary, and again, we will continue to let it work. And Newmont, I will just continue to let it work. And the more extended we get from the 50 simple moving average, the more I will continue to trim until we can tighten back up. And yes, I am trying to find my way back into stocks, and I'm comfortable to play them both ways. I'm just a little early on ideas, right? We talked about this already. Short AppLovin, and then short when it tried to re-break the 50 simple moving average. Did not work. Took my little lumps in AppLovin only to watch it hit the 20 simple and then start to roll over completely. So right idea, wrong timing. That is just kind of what's going on. It's the same thing with Tesla, right? I thought that this thing could show some real strength. I bought this on the 8th, added on the 9th, added on the 13th, got stopped out, right? And then now we're right back at it. So it feels like one of those right idea, wrong timing kind of problems to have. And it just is what it is, right? I'm not overly stressed about it. That's just trading, and we have to take things one day at a time. Continue to do your job. Continue to look for stocks that are showing relative strength. Kind of bundle things up in the back of your mind as groups. Hopefully the data center stocks want to do something. Rare earth stocks, obviously today, pretty interesting. Nuclear stocks today continue to show some strength. Memory names continue to show strength. XLV related names, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, biotechs continue to be very, very strong. And then, maybe there will be some continuation, some broadening out. If you looked at the KRE, this does look like, it might want to go higher. Yes, you are kind of rejecting this little left side peak, but it does look like we might want to go higher, and that would be a bonus for the IWM. So again, no more real opinions for me other than to just continue to let things work that I'm in and are working well. But it's like it's unless you're in some stocks from a whole lot earlier or your stock selection is incredibly on point, then you are dealing with some chop just like myself, and that's just the nature of the beast sometimes, right? Not a big deal. Again, continue to do your job. Do not get demoralized, and then show up the next day and do your job. So, and eventually things will stick, things will turn around. Continue to focus on the best groups in the market. Do not buy extended, and just take it from there. So anyway, hopefully you guys are all trading well, trading better than myself, and I will see you all bright and early tomorrow morning. Cheers.